Hello everyone. This is a video about pituitary hormones, which I decided to make because pituitary hormones are one of the most annoying things to memorize, at least for me. And this is a note sheet I made with a couple mnemonics that should help make it easier to recall this information. So anyway, let's get started. Firstly, the pituitary gland is this really tiny gland in the base of the brain, behind the nose and above the back of the sinuses, that is very vital and controls a lot of different functions all over the body, which is why it's also called a master gland. And there are nine major hormones created by the two lobes of the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. So we will go over the anterior pituitary first. And here there are seven major hormones that are created. And you can use the mnemonic flat pig to remember this, which make sure you specify the context because this can come out really wrong if you use it in the wrong place. So, firstly, these first two hormones go pretty well together. They're called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, going by the tags FSH and LH for short. So, they're both involved in reproductive systems. So, for follicle stimulating hormone, in males, it helps with spermatogenesis, specifically in these cells called Sertoli cells, which are found in the testes, which are the male gonads or male sex organs. And in females, they help ovarian follicular growth, basically the growth of the egg before it gets released from the ovary. And this happens in granulosa cells. Meanwhile, with luteinizing hormone, it spurs ovulation along with FSH, which we'll expand on later. And it has a little bit of a different occurrence in both males and females. In females, it's released only in the second part of the menstrual cycle, and if male, it's released constantly. Um, it also has the production of testosterone from testes in male, from specifically cells called Leydig cells, and the production of estrogen and also progesterone from females, which happens in granulosa cells, which are the cells we mentioned earlier with follicle stimulating hormone. So there's a specific um, transduction pathway that occurs with this, where it starts with TICA cells, which create androgens in the female. And these stimulate the granulosa cells to create estrogen, progesterone. So just a little extra fact. So this yellow box over here is the same between follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. They're both the highest during ovulation. They have the highest amount of activity during ovulation, but they're both really low during both pregnancy and menstruation. And they're both inhibited by the same things, either by progesterone and by excessive estradiol or testosterone. So if you see this graph over here, you can see the female menstrual cycle and where FSH and LH peak. So if you see here during ovulation, these spikes of both FSH and LH stimulate the release of the egg from the follicle. And then once the egg bursts out of its shell, progesterone kicks in and then it slaps the ass of these two hormones. And then both of those dip down and go back to regular levels during menstruation. When the cycle starts again, this happens again. It's a little bit different when someone gets pregnant, but that is not a topic that I want to go over right now. And remember that both these act on the testes and the ovaries specifically. So the third hormone created by the anterior pituitary and the A in our mnemonic is going to be ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now what this does is it triggers the adrenal glands, which are kind of these hats that go over the kidneys. They're kind of cute. And they produce quite a few things. The adrenal glands produce aldosterone, which is a mineralocorticoid, which has the reuptake of ions and increases blood volume. So this sounds kind of confusing. And what it does is, from the kidney, it takes what would be going into the urine and pushes it out into the blood. So if you lose a little bit of blood, this helps take out some of the ones that you would have had excreted eventually, and just helps you get back to speed a little bit. Um, and then this is created from the outer layer of the adrenal cortex called the zona glomerulosa. So with this picture over here, we can see that the adrenal glands usually have two layers, a medulla, which is the inner layer, and a cortex, which is the outer layer. Out of this, the cortex can be divided into three separate layers: the zona glomerulosa, the outer layer, the zona fasciculata, which is the middle layer, and the zona reticularis, which is the inner layer. So each of these are stimulated by ACTH to create a different set of hormones. So middle layer, the zona fasciculata, creates cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And I bet you've had plenty of this lately. I mean, you're looking at this video at the first place. You're probably studying for a test or a competition. I mean, is anyone here trying to get into college? um, yeah, I feel that. So then the inner layer, also called the zona reticularis, is stimulated by ACTH to create androgens, which are steroid sex hormones. And then finally, the medulla, which ACTH is less effective for stimulating, creates epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is your classic fight or flight response. And this is basically what happens if you get chased by a bear or something. And you get really scared and you run away. So then the thyroid stimulating hormone is the T in our mnemonic. And this triggers, you guessed it, the thyroid. So there are three main hormones that will be created from the thyroid. Two of them have basically the same purpose. They're triiodothyronine and T4, which is thyroxine. Sorry. And then this stimulates the metabolism of almost every cell in the human body. It's also a reason that you should take iodine and iodized salt. As you see, these hormones have iodine in them, as you see by the iodo prefix. And then if you don't take your iodine, this can actually cause goiters, which is an enlarged thyroid gland. And then there's also calcitonin, which has roles involving, you guessed it, calcium. So firstly, it lowers the calcium ion concentration in blood, and it inhibits the intestine calcium absorption. And it puts calcium in bones, and it also takes it out of urine. So it does help your bones get a little bit stronger. So moving on, there are still three more hormones we need to learn about for the anterior pituitary gland. Firstly, there's prolactin, which helps support lactation. So this is just milk coming out of human breasts. And it also supports breast development in females. And actually, if you have hyperprolactinism, it can cause enlarged breast development. And if you're male, you can have breasts too. Congratulations. It can also cause bone loss if you take too much. And prolactin, it's been proven, or at least theorized, that it's been around for invertebrates for a very long time because it has a wide variety of functions that evolve in many different other types of vertebrates. I mean, in birds, it molts feathers, so get rid of feathers when they become less useful anymore. And in fish, they help with osmoregulation, or regulating the concentration inside and outside the fish. It also helps with reproductive timing in many vertebrates. I mean, we as humans don't really have reproductive timing. I mean, cicadas, they happen every like 13 to 17 years. Imagine only being able to have sex every 13 to 17 years. I know some people would die if that was the case. And then I stands for intermedin, which is most commonly called by melanocyte stimulating hormone, or MSH. But I mean, we got to fit the mnemonic here somewhere. So that's what we're using. So this one's pretty simple. It stimulates melanocytes, which creates melanin and makes a darker pigment. So a fader brown to a darker brown. Um, in skin color, specifically skin color is very prominent. And then finally, for the anterior pituitary, you have the growth hormone, or GH, which regulates the growth of body. So smaller to taller. I mean, I wish I had a lot more of this. It's a helpful hormone. And, you know, when you realize you're not going to be that tall, you have a little bit of a feeling that you just want to take more of this. And I'm sorry to tell you, it doesn't really work if you're an adult anymore. It does work in kids. So kids that have a growth defect can take this in their milk and helps them grow a little bit taller. But if you're an adult, after growth finishes, it maintains normal. It just helps maintain normal blood sugar levels and doesn't actually cause you to grow anymore, which is sad. It's tragic, and it's also called somatotropin. Just a little extra thing. So for the posterior pituitary, there are really only two main hormones that are created, and I like to remember this by Kendrick Lamar's "OVO," and that works like a charm. Um, so the two hormones are oxytocin and vasopressin. So for oxytocin, this is called a love hormone, but it's more like the pleasure hormone because it can be secreted with things like massages. And big releases happen with breastfeeding and childbirth and sex. And I mean, against my better judgment, I actually drew representation for this. Yeah, I couldn't help myself. And this is also important in reproduction and feeling bonding with our young. So, I mean, if we didn't have this, then we would think that babies are more useless than they already are. A little bit of a problem for if we actually want to create a human race. And then vasopressin, also called antidiuretic hormone, sorry, symbolized by ADH, controls urine production by increasing water reabsorption in the kidneys. So what this does is water from that's going to be excreted goes out of your collecting duct. Actually, it goes out of the system of the liquid that's going to be excreted, and it goes back into the blood. And this helps you not lose that much fluid in your urine, and also helps with not getting dehydrated in case you're in that kind of scenario. And this makes urine very concentrated because it lets the ion stay in. Um, It's also a vasoconstrictor, which means it can control blood pressure, and it makes blood vessels smaller if you have a larger amount of it. So, in summary, with the anterior pituitary, there are seven different hormones: follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which help with the reproductive system; adrenocorticotropic hormone, which stimulates the adrenal glands; thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid and helps out with metabolism; prolactin, which induces lactation; intermedin or melanocyte stimulating hormone, which makes your skin darker. Congratulations. And growth hormone, which just helps you grow. And for posterior pituitary hormones, which you can remember by OVHO, oxytocin, which is the pleasure hormone and helps with breastfeeding, childbirth, and sex, all the stuff that your parents don't want me talking about. And then vasopressin, which controls urine production and makes urine concentrated. Okay, so that's about all that is there to pituitary hormone. So I hope you learned something and I hope this helped you. Thanks.